There is a plant growing in the cracks of your driveway right now that modern nutrition science says should not exist. A plant with thick green leaves and red crawling stems that quietly contains more omega-3 fatty acids than salmon, not by serving size but leaf for leaf. A plant humans relied on for thousands of years before supermarkets, supplements, or industrial farms ever existed. And yet most people have been trained to spray it with poison without ever learning its name. This plant fed ancient civilizations, crossed continents without human permission, and survived every empire that collapsed. Yet today, it is dismissed as nothing more than an invasive weed. Archaeological evidence proves humans have eaten it for at least 4,000 years. In 1050 BC, someone in northern Greece sealed its seeds inside a clay vessel, and when archaeologists opened that container 3,000 years later, they found the seeds unchanged, identical to the same plant, still growing wild between the surrounding stones. By the 7th century BC, those same seeds appeared in one of the most important sanctuaries in ancient Greece, not as debris, but as deliberate offerings. By the 4th century BC, the philosopher Theophrastus was writing precise cultivation instructions, telling farmers exactly when to sow this plant alongside their essential crops, which makes one thing very clear. This was not a weed. This was food. The Roman Empire cultivated it across 3 continents. Medieval Europeans consumed it daily. And in 1288, when Milan compiled a complete record of everything its people ate, this plant appeared not as a curiosity, but as a staple. For centuries, it existed quietly at the center of human diets. After 1492, Europeans assumed it crossed the Atlantic with settlers, but later archaeological discoveries proved otherwise. Seeds found in Kentucky date back to 800 BC, seeds found in Ontario to the 14th century, long before European contact. Native American societies had already been cultivating it alongside sunflowers, squash, and chenopod's as part of the Eastern agricultural complex. 2 civilizations separated by an ocean independently reached the same conclusion that this plant was worth growing, eating, and preserving. Its name is purslane, known across the world as kulfa in India, glista in Greece, verdolaga in Mexico, and machixian in China, a low-growing plant with smooth red stems, succulent paddle-shaped leaves, and tiny yellow flowers tucked between the joints. It thrives where other crops fail, in heat, drought, poor soil, and neglect. And that resilience is exactly what sealed its fate in the modern world. As industrial agriculture rose, plants that couldn't be controlled became enemies. Purslane could not be patented. Its seeds remained viable for decades. Every broken stem rooted into new life, and it refused to obey systems built on ownership and dependence. Instead of being studied as a solution, it was rebranded as a problem, labeled invasive, banned by homeowners associations, and targeted by eradication guides. What disappeared was not just a plant, but knowledge. The knowledge that food does not have to come from factories, that nutrition does not require chemicals, and that the most powerful plants on Earth are often the ones humans did not design. For decades, scientists believed heart disease was inevitable once a population consumed too much fat. Yet one island completely destroyed that assumption and forced nutrition science to admit it was missing something critical. In 1960, physiologist Ansel Keys launched the 7-country study, tracking 12,763 men across 7 nations for over 50 years to understand why some populations were dying of heart disease while others were not. What he found shocked the scientific world. On the island of Crete, farmers consumed diets where more than 35% of calories came from fat, one of the highest fat intakes ever recorded at the time. And according to every dominant theory, they should have been dying from heart attacks. Instead, they had the lowest cardiovascular mortality rate Keyes had ever measured, lower than Japan, lower than Finland, lower than anywhere else in the study. For years, researchers credited olive oil and monounsaturated fats, calling it Mediterranean magic, a neat explanation that allowed the system to move on without deeper investigation. But in the 1980s, a new generation of scientists revisited the frozen blood samples from the original study, this time looking not at cholesterol, but at omega-3 fatty acids. What they found rewrote the story entirely. The people of Crete had nearly 3 times the omega-3 levels of populations in Northern Europe. Yet they were not eating more fish. In fact, fish consumption was relatively low. The source came from something far simpler and far closer to the ground. They were eating purslane every single day. It appeared raw in salads, cooked into stews, sautéed with olive oil, and fed to chickens, goats, and sheep. The animals consumed purslane, the people consumed the animals, and the entire food system recycled its nutrients through a single plant growing wild across the island. In 1992, Dr. Artemis Simopoulos analyzed purslane directly, expecting modest results, and instead found concentrations of alpha-linolenic acid so high they initially seemed implausible, between 300 and 400 milligrams per 100 grams of fresh leaves. That made purslane the richest vegetable source of omega-3 fatty acids ever measured, containing 5 to 7 times more than spinach and many times more than lettuce. But the results became even more disruptive when researchers confirmed that purslane produces trace amounts of EPA, a marine omega-3 previously believed to exist only in fish and algae. Initial skepticism led to repeated testing, but contamination was ruled out. The plant was doing something land plants were not supposed to do. Further analysis revealed purslane also contains exceptionally high levels of vitamin E, beta-carotene, melatonin, glutathione, potassium, magnesium, and calcium, placing it among the most nutrient-dense plants ever studied. When the Lion Diet Heart Study later tested whether a diet rich in purslane and omega-3s could save lives, patients recovering from heart attacks experienced 70% fewer deaths from all causes, not just fewer cardiac events. The results were so dramatic, the study was stopped early because continuing to deny the control group access to the diet became ethically impossible. What scientists uncovered next about purslane pushed it beyond nutrition and into a category most researchers did not believe was even biologically possible. Because this plant does something inside its cells that no other species on Earth has ever been observed doing. To understand why this matters, you have to understand how plants normally survive. Most plants use C3 photosynthesis, a system that works well in moderate temperatures but fails under heat and drought. Crops, like corn and sugarcane, evolved C4 photosynthesis, which performs better in high temperatures but still requires consistent water. Desert plants like cacti use CAM photosynthesis, opening their pores at night to collect carbon dioxide when temperatures are lower, and sealing them during the day to prevent water loss. But this comes with a trade-off because CAM plants grow extremely slowly. For years, scientists knew purslane was unusual because it appeared to use both C4 and CAM pathways. But they assumed the plants separated them into different tissues, keeping the systems isolated to avoid conflict. That assumption collapsed in 2022 when researchers at Yale mapped gene expression across individual purslane cells and discovered both photosynthesis systems operating inside the same cells at the same time. During the day, purslane runs C4 photosynthesis for rapid growth, and at night, it activates CAM to conserve water, feeding the products of nighttime reactions directly into the daytime growth pathway. No other plant on Earth does this. Researchers described it as a rare and powerful combination of traits, effectively creating a superplant capable of thriving under conditions that destroy most crops. One scientist compared it to discovering an engine that runs on gasoline and electricity simultaneously inside the same chamber, rather than switching between modes. This cellular flexibility explains why purslane survives on 1/5 the water corn requires, grows in soils so salty most crops die within days, and accelerates photosynthesis when temperatures rise above levels that shut down soybeans and wheat. It also explains why purslane completes its entire life cycle on as little as 6 inches of annual rainfall, conditions that climate models predict will become increasingly common across the world. Its reproductive strategy is just as extreme. A single plant can produce up to 200,000 seeds, each capable of remaining viable in soil for as long as 40 years. Every broken stem that touches the ground can root into a new plant, allowing it to spread even when damaged. Attempts to kill it through extreme heat have repeatedly failed. In one university study testing soil solarization, researchers concluded that if purslane dies under plastic-covered soil, every possible variable must go perfectly right, making eradication unreliable at best. This is not accidental resilience. It is the result of evolutionary pressure over thousands of years, shaping a plant capable of surviving drought, heat, neglect, and human hostility. While modern science pours billions into engineering crops that might one day tolerate harsher climates, purslane already does, quietly growing underfoot, using a photosynthesis system that rewrote textbooks and forced researchers to admit that nature had solved a problem humanity was still trying to understand. If purslane is so nutritious, resilient, and scientifically extraordinary, the obvious question is why it vanished from modern food systems. And the answer has nothing to do with health and everything to do with control, money, and industrial convenience. Modern agriculture is built around predictability, uniformity, and ownership, and purslane breaks every one of those rules. The global herbicide market surpassed $40 billion in 2024, and chemical companies sell multiple products formulated specifically to eliminate purslane from lawns, gardens, and agricultural fields. Substances like 2,4-D, a chemical originally developed during World War II, along with newer formulations marketed as weed control, are now common household tools, reinforced by homeowners associations, agricultural extension offices, and municipal regulations that treat purslane as an invasive threat. The irony is that purslane is not targeted because it damages ecosystems or crowds out native species, but because it cannot be controlled. You cannot patent it. Its seeds remain viable in soil for decades, and it does not require farmers to buy new seed each season. Every broken stem can regenerate, making monoculture-style management nearly impossible. In an economic system that profits from dependency, a plant that reproduces freely and feeds people without input is not a solution. It is a liability. Every major omega-3 source on the market depends on centralized production. Wild fish stocks are collapsing under overfishing. Farmed salmon requires massive infrastructure and chemical inputs. Flaxseed oil degrades quickly, and supplements cost consumers significant money every year. Purslane, by contrast, grows freely in almost every climate zone where humans live, produces more omega-3 per acre than any cultivated crop, and asks for little more than sunlight and occasional rain. Half the world never abandoned it. In India, it is eaten as kulfa. In Greece, klista appears in summer salads. In Mexico, verdolaga is sautéed with garlic and chilies. In China, machixian has been cultivated continuously for thousands of years. Across the Middle East, it appears in everyday meals. The other half of the world was taught to poison it. Agricultural manuals framed it as a nuisance, lawn culture labeled it unsightly, and chemical solutions were normalized as responsible maintenance. What disappeared was not just purslane from plates, but the cultural memory of food systems that functioned without industrial input. Modern agriculture did not eliminate purslane because it failed as food, but because it succeeded too well outside systems built on profit and control. In an era facing climate instability, supply chain fragility, and rising nutritional deficiencies, the idea that one of the most resilient, nutrient-dense plants on Earth was deliberately erased should force a difficult question. What other solutions are we destroying simply because they cannot be owned? The future of food is often framed as a problem that requires new technology, engineered seeds, and massive investment. Yet one of the most climate-resilient crops humanity will ever need is already growing beneath our feet, ignored, sprayed, and dismissed as worthless. Climate models consistently show that semi-arid regions will experience the earliest and most severe crop failures as rainfall becomes less predictable and temperatures rise. Corn and wheat require 20 to 30 inches of annual rain to remain productive. Soybeans shut down photosynthesis above 95 degrees, and many staple crops fail entirely under saline soil conditions. Purslane thrives in precisely these environments. It completes its life cycle on as little as 6 inches of rainfall, accelerates growth under extreme heat, and tolerates soil salinity levels that would kill most agricultural plants within days. Identifying it requires no expertise. It grows low to the ground with smooth red stems, thick succulent leaves shaped like paddles, no surface hairs, and tiny yellow flowers hidden between the joints. When a stem is broken, the interior appears juicy and translucent. Harvesting it young, within the first 6 weeks, produces tender leaves with a lemony, slightly salty crunch that can be eaten raw, sautéed like spinach, added to stews, blended into smoothies, pickled, or dried for winter use. Allowing a few plants to mature provides an abundance of seed, often hundreds of thousands from a single plant, enough to supply entire gardens or communities. Each person who learns to recognize purslane takes a small but meaningful step away from dependency on fragile supply chains and toward food systems rooted in resilience rather than control. The uncomfortable reality is that the most nutritious plants on Earth are often the ones modern society trained people to destroy. The herbicide industry does not benefit from a free source of omega-3 fatty acids growing in driveways. The supplement industry does not profit from a plant that replicates what is sold in $20 bottles. The agricultural industry does not want widespread awareness that a plant scientists are trying to engineer already exists in the wild. Purslane has fed humans for over 4,000 years, survived droughts, empires, and chemical warfare, and adapted to conditions that now threaten global food security. It does not need permission, branding, or approval to continue doing what it has always done. It grows, it feeds, and it persists. The only question left is whether modern societies will continue to treat it as an enemy, or finally recognize that the solution they are searching for has been growing quietly at their feet all along.